you'll find that most people are like, yeah, that's a cool challenge. Let's go for it. You come marching in the room and saying, right, we're going to save money. The developers are like, oh, it's costing a lot of money. It's not being used outside of those hours. SaaS is a difficult one. I think that it is quite a lot of work to manage that. I wouldn't say going rogue, but paying on the credit card and it's not visible to the central procurement team. And actually, it's quite fun challenge to sort of come up with these new ways of working.
Hi everyone, just before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to ask you to do two things for us. The first thing is to please subscribe. If you like our content and you think it's worth your while, subscribing is going to let us know that you value the content and that we should continue to make it. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do is to listen and listen carefully. The whole intention behind this podcast is to help you. We're here to offer different perspectives, to assist you with whatever journey you're on. So please feel free to ask any questions in the comments or to make suggestions around future topics that we can cover on the podcast, and we'll do our best to get back to you. So without further ado, let's get on with the episode. So a few weeks ago, we released a short video where we interviewed Roger Leyland, Professional Services Director here at Cetero, on the upcoming release of some of our brand new products for cloud management and SaaS management. Now, the reception we got from that video was actually really good, and it just made us think, well, why don't we do a bit more on FinOps? So today I'm pleased to say we've got Mike Wood, who heads up our development team here at Cetero. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
No, it's really good. Thanks so much for joining. So, Mike, it's fair to say from a FinOps perspective, you're probably one of the key guys at Cetero who kind of understands the concept, and, you're really pioneering what we do and how we kind of view FinOps and align ourselves with it as well. But just, this episode's all about FinOps as a practice, really. So do you want to just start off by just giving us a quick overview for the audience, really, and understanding what FinOps actually is?
Yeah, so FinOps, if we go back a bit further, sort of came about because it was missing. If we go back to 2007, 2008, we had the DevOps movement start to sort of bloom and take hold within the development community and tech sector in general. There's actually a really good book by an author called Gene Kim, who sort of came up and pioneered with others that movement called the Phoenix Project. And it takes like a fictional company who's, they're stuck in their ways, they're doing things old school, and they're being, outmaneuvered by their competitors. And that sort of thing prompted them to start looking into how they were working. And this fictional story sort of goes from sort of old school lethargic movement to the agile DevOps development practices. And it's a pretty good story of how, a company can transition and move with the times and get more agile. So I'd highly recommend that to anyone who's starting to look at FinOps, because it gives you that basis. Because for me, the way I describe FinOps at a very high level is it is DevOps, but we're now including finance. And that was always left out. So that's one of the things where you start with the best of intentions, but as things move, cloud made us more agile, but it also meant that developers like myself can spin something up and generate 10 to 100,000 pounds worth of spend in a matter of hours. So yeah, FinOps is the management of cloud spend, SaaS spend, but it's wrapped around DevOps really. And that's where we are today, sort of moving with that.
Right. So FinOps really is about stopping businesses overspending on these types of resources, would you say?
Yeah, it is. That's a very important factor. And I think that's probably one of the driving factors that started the FinOps movement. But it is more than that. There's a lot to do with just right sizing, anomaly detection, all these sorts of things also play in, but they're not always focused on cost. It could just be that you want to make sure that you are compliant with the policies of the company you work for. So it could be where you spin up resources. It could be right sizing VMs to make sure that you're actually using stuff in a reasonable way, because, well, developers are famous for perhaps over provisioning what they need. You can get away with X, but they like to go X times 10. So yeah, it is finance, but it also is those other bits as well. It's the actual working of it.
Yeah. Okay. So if a company were to start FinOps and they want to get into it, where do they start? What are the first steps?
Well, it's unique for each company, but the FinOps Foundation, who are sort of pioneering trailblazers in this framework development, have set out 3 phases, which really just sort of take it to the bedrock of what you need to know, and that's inform, optimize, and operate. So those stages, I mean, the first one, what am I doing? What have I got out there? What's happening? Some of these resources that we spin up in the cloud, they're ephemeral. They might last 10 minutes. They might last an hour. Some are always on. And it's not always clear, just looking at the cloud providers' dashboards. Do I need all these? Are these all being used? There's a lot that you've got to do to check that. So the first phase is just inform yourself of it. Get those billing reports that you get. The cost data is a very good way of keeping track of not just the cost, but what's spun up. Because if you were to export a list of current resources, you're going to miss your ephemeral ones. So the cost data, because cost, it holds you to account, provides that information and provides you with an overview daily, weekly, over time, with the resources that you're using. So getting that cost data, analyzing it however you can, and seeing, the progress that you're making. Are new things being spun up all the time? Are you in an ever expanding sort of cloud spiral where developers are spinning stuff up and not spinning it down, or infrastructure spinning stuff up in response to, queries or requests, but not spinning it down? And it'll give you that basis of informing yourself.
Yeah. Interesting. And what would you say the optimize phase brings?
The optimized phase is generally quite a popular one, because what you can do is realize a heck of a lot of savings.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen an awful lot of customers that have just got a lot of waste. We put products and services in place for them, and we find out that actually you've got 100 disks just floating in the ether. They're not attached to any VMs. They're not being used for any services. And you sort of think, well, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's the obvious stuff. And then when you move on from that, you can start to right size. So if you have services or plans, are they sufficient? Because a lot of the time, developers are cautious. I've seen it time and time again where they think, "Oh, I'm not sure how well this will run. So what I'll do, I'll throw all the stuff I can at it. I'll increase the RAM. I'll increase the service plan. I'll shard it across multiple regions. I'll do X, Y, Z." And when you look at it, you're like, they're not being utilized. They are minimal utilization. So we can really step that down and start to right size, which, it can be a very high value cost saving. It is not cheap.
Yeah.
It's not.
Okay. No, good. Then after optimize, obviously we move into operate. So what does that look like?
Operate is, this is a cyclical process. So after operate, we go back to inform and we do the cycle again. But the first stage, the first time operate, that's all about putting policies and procedures within your company around what you're doing. So if you notice that people are spinning stuff up and not spinning it down when it's no longer required, that might mean that you put policies in place where there are change requests for spinning up, and it can be auto approved. We're not trying to slow the process down. That's not what we want to do. But what we want to do is put those guardrails in place. So I've spun this up, and it might be, how long do I need it for? And you put in a number of days, a number of hours, a number of minutes in some cases. And when that time elapses, then you can get alerts back from the system to say, right, they've said they needed it. They've had it for the allotted time. Check, reach out, automatically send them a message to say, do you still need this? Yes, no. Quick Slack message, and it's spun down again. Very low friction, but those policies can make a difference, especially to spend. And then you start the process again, and it might be that you have to spin up a central team to sort of look after FinOps as you mature, because at first, everyone should be employing tactics of FinOps, employing parts of the framework where it fits their needs. But I don't think that you should be dogmatic in your approach. This isn't one of those do it by the book all the way to make sure that you are perfect with FinOps. You've got to start somewhere and start small, cost reports, inform yourself, and then tweak to optimize it, and then put those guardrails in place when you're operating, and then do the cycle again and keep going.
Because FinOps themselves, they've got the crawl, walk, run mentality around these things as well. So it's okay for businesses to start off and mature over time. And I suppose that cyclic approach of going through the whole inform, optimize, operate, applying crawl, walk, run, they're going to see changes over time as you go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always recommend the first thing that people should do is download the cost reports from their service providers and start to look at that. And most of the time, those are CSVs. So you're in Excel, you're pivoting, you're moving data about. It's a very manual, tedious process. But until you can inform yourself for the first time, you're not really in a position to say, well, I need X, I need another tool. And I don't think that should be the way forward. I think you need to inform yourself, you need to have a bit of a review, reach out to someone who does this sort of stuff and say, right, here's my cost data. Can you just give me some pointers on this? And it goes further than that, but again, it does form the basis of it. And that's sort of your crawl phase, and then when you walk in, it might be that you've got some policies in place. It might be that you've got some optimizations already carried out. You're constantly checking and monitoring things. And it does get better and better. And then in the run phase, a lot of these things do end up requiring a tool that is, tailor-made for this. Because one thing that people don't take into account, because just to preface this, everyone can do this just with Excel and the reports. But what they can't do is keep adjusting over time, because these reports change so quickly. I've been working quite closely with the Azure team to look at the Azure APIs and the Azure cost reports, and they're changing sometimes daily. Sometimes I will go home on a Friday, come back on a Monday, and they've changed the data, and it could be new columns, it could be they've swapped out columns, or they've just got new versions of the reports that you've got to set up again. So in the run phase, a tool can be invaluable. Just offloading that extra. It's a job, that a team of people can manage for you, keeping up to date with all the information. So what you get is a distilled data set that you can work with, and it's going to be the same, and if there's updates, it'll be catered for. So Yeah, those sort of crawl, walk, run cycles are very important. Sort of build yourself up. Don't run before you can crawl, I
Yeah,
suppose.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just common sense, I suppose.
yeah.
No, it's really good. And I suppose, with the introduction of focus, do you feel that, these changes, these unexpected changes, do you feel they're going to continue or are they going to slow down? Because this is quite a new concept for everybody. Everyone's still learning, even the cloud vendors.
Yeah.
They're still adjusting to cater for, FinOps practices. They're all on board, they're bought in. So do you feel that it will normalize, it will get easier, or is this ever evolving with new technology, require new fields? It's just constantly going to change.
Yeah, I think it is going to change.
Yeah.
I think focus. So for those who don't know, focus is a data specification for the cost data for cloud providers' cost data, which basically means that Azure data will be comparable to AWS's data or GCP's data, and so on and so on for each cloud provider. And all the major cloud providers have said, yes, we will provide focus specification data for cost analysis. And one of the things that does is take resource types like Azure Blob Storage or AWS S3 buckets, and it just says storage. So you're comparing storage costs um, against each other across the cloud providers. So it means that you can see a single pane of glass for those cloud costs. Now we're on specification, I think it's 1.1 as of now, and we're working on 1.2, or the FinOps Foundation is working on specification 1.2, and it does change a lot. It's not been around a long time, and it has kept evolving. Um, they're talking now about including SaaS. So that was the latest we saw at FinOps X in San Diego when we went. That's a much bigger focus for the FinOps Foundation, because again that was left out, and it was sort of, well, what about us? And that's been brought in. So focus specification data for SaaS costs, that's going to come in, that's going to be new, and it's going to take iterations. These guys aren't pretending that they're going to get it right first time, but they are doing a hell of a job to make lives easier for every consumer of cloud services and now SaaS services. So I think it's going to be ever changing. And again, that's why teams are spinning up to manage this within companies, and that's why tools like ours, are being so well received in the market, because what people want is an easy way to see their data and compare it. Where is it cheaper? Is it cheaper in Azure? Is it cheaper in AWS or Google? It's it's an interesting, ever evolving set of data.
Okay, so you talk about DevOps. FinOps is kind of a progression from DevOps. DevOps very, very technical.
Yeah.
Largely built for developers, I suppose. And then FinOps, obviously, it includes other personas from around the business, like finance. So there's a lot of coming together from different people and minds here, I suppose, from different walks of life within a business.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, with DevOps, just to name a few, you did have developers, but it was also, the infrastructure guys, the IT operations guys, the QA guys, the security guys, and others. And it's very much the same with FinOps. It only works really when everyone's collaborating and communicating together. Just like with DevOps, you need to spread that knowledge and that data. If you are seeing spikes in, say, for example, QA testing's cloud area, then you'll need to approach them and talk to them about it. If it is something in the developers region, then it's got to be, sort of surface to them as well. it is very much about spreading that knowledge, compliance and security, that sort of stuff. Where is stuff being spun up? If something's being spun up in, a non-GDPR compliant country, should that be flagged to security? If we've got resources being spun up outside of the policies, should that go to security? Should it just be disseminated to everyone so everyone's aware? So yeah, you really need to collaborate and sort of get together. I mean, it sounds very much like it's a dogmatic approach, and again, you just got to find what works for you. But a lot of people find that when they start implementing FinOps, they're actually a lot more innovative as as a company and as teams, because it could be that the FinOps practitioner or the analyst comes to the business and says, "Guys, I've noticed that we've got this VM. I've spread the information, done a bit of research, and it's come back as a QA VM, and they're using it to run various tests on overnight, or 2 or 3 times a day. It's costing a lot of money. It's not being used outside of those hours, so it can sort of foster that spirit of innovation. And especially as a developer, I love having a problem to solve more than anything. So that sort of thing can drive people to think outside the box and think, okay, well, actually, if we spun this up with something like a Terraform script, just before QA run the tests, and then QA run the tests, and then it's then spun down straight after the tests are finished, and that sort of thing can save a lot of money. And actually, it's quite fun challenge to sort of come up with these new ways of working. So yeah, it's a very collaborative approach. You cannot silo the people who are trying to progress their FinOps journey, because if you do, then it's just going to stall and go nowhere. You need to get buy-in from people, and what FinOps means to different departments, it's important to sort of explain that on an individual basis. If you come marching in the room and saying, right, we're going to save money, the developers are like, oh gosh, we need this stuff. Or, the QA guys will be like, okay, well, I guess I'll just, try and figure it out. But if you come in and say, listen, we've got the opportunity to optimize this a little bit, can you come up with like a good solution for this? And, try and optimize it as much as possible and see if that we can get that. You'll find that most people are like, yeah, that's a cool challenge. Let's go for it. Yeah. And they'll all get their heads together and they'll come up with something completely new, which, can be really good, especially for companies out there that have started their cloud journey. And I've seen it time and time again. They move on-prem to cloud, which again, everyone's probably thinking, well, yeah, and that's what cloud's like. But what they'll do, they'll have hypervisors and virtual servers, and all this infrastructure they will clone in the cloud. But obviously, the benefit of the cloud is that Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they're very clever companies, and they've gone, well, we'll generate various different resource types that you can use for different tasks. So rather than the old school approach, and it happens more often than I'd like to see within the wider industry, people pick up that Windows server that's running, a web server on it, Tomcat, IIS, something like that, sometimes a Linux server, and they put it in the cloud as another VM, just doing that same thing. And you're paying far more than just saying, right, I'll have a web server in Azure or AWS, So yeah, that attitude of innovation and collaboration really will drive down those cost bills.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
absolutely. Good. And, we don't just end there. It's a kind of cyclic approach, I suppose, FinOps. So, once we're finished operate, back to the beginning and go through Inform again, I take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You keep going round, and it's about constant improvement, just like the agile cycle. It's all about, where am I now? How can I improve it? And how can I put things in place to keep that improvement alive? And then you go back and you do it again. And some cycles you might think, oh, there's not much else to eke out of it, but things change at a dramatic rate of knots. Prices change, new services come out, new resource types come out, other resource types get sort of sunsetted and slowly fade away. So it's important to keep going. And I think complacency, thinking that you've got it right, um, is when things start to go wrong, unfortunately.
Yeah. I like the way that, FinOps have kind of labeled it as crawl, walk, run. It's a nice descriptor, and it's easy for people to kind of compartmentalize what they're doing into a level of maturity. But, there'll be some aspects of FinOps where it's perfectly acceptable to crawl, or
Yeah.
they might want to, be able to run in certain aspects. But I suppose it just gives people that ability to almost set their own goals and measure where they are against them.
Yeah, you've got to. If you say a framework is only achievable if you are perfect across the board, then, well, one, that's setting up a bit of an impossible task,
Yeah.
and it's daunting. And really, the FinOps Foundation, they say it time and time again. It's not about perfection; it's about moving towards perfection. You need to start somewhere, and that crawl phase, those Excel spreadsheets, or the simple stuff. I mean, it seems overwhelming at first trying to get into this whole FinOps thing, and you've got to take it slow, and you have got to crawl, because if you try and move faster than you're able, one, you might make decisions that get you, down the rabbit hole, and it could be the wrong rabbit hole. But two, it can overwhelm people, certainly. So yeah, it's important you start at the start. Don't try and start at the end, and just take it slow. Keep picking up and keep trying to improve slowly.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Now, we've talked a lot about cloud, but obviously SaaS is a big problem for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's changed fundamentally how people are accessing and using software. How's that playing into FinOps?
So the FinOps Foundation themselves, they've just this year announced that they're bringing SaaS into the fold and helping manage SaaS. And that is another area where we've gone from the the historic perpetual licenses. You'd get Office 97, Office 2003. That was a popular one for, well, nearly a decade, and then 2007, 2013. You could buy those licenses and you just have them. And if you were on that version, you could keep going, and it was no issue. And that really didn't generate the sorts of revenue that tech companies want. Sometimes the user base for some SaaS products, historically, when they were perpetual licenses, it was small. But they'd have it for over a decade, and you've charged them 50 quid. It wasn't worth the updates, and people, weren't upgrading at the speed they wanted them to. So the move to SaaS, to the subscription model, it has its downsides. It overall ends up being a bit more costly, but what you do get is those constant updates, because it's now an affordable model for the company selling it to keep updating it. But that, again, has become like cloud costs. Rather than buying a server and putting it in your server room, you've now got these ongoing costs for various cloud resources, which you've got to manage, because it's recurring. You've got to make sure you're keeping an eye on it. And it's the same with SaaS. You used to just hand over 50 quid for a license, and that was it. So now you've got that recurring cost and you've got to manage that. Because if you pay some money for a perpetual license and someone uses it for a few months and then stops, I guess you're not really too concerned with that because it's done. There's no saving to be had. You've made your bed, you got to lie in it. But what we find with SaaS is there are users that we're paying a monthly fee for and they never touched it.
Yeah.
I think the SaaS market last year was worth 390 billion. That's expected to almost double in the next 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
So, if you can reduce your number of licenses across the board for people not using it by even, 3 to 5%, you're still talking about savings of billions across the industry. And those numbers translate to, a company's individual costs proportionally. So it's important that we highlight who is using what, and who, more importantly, who's not, and can we adjust from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've certainly noticed a shift. I think everyone, who works in our industry appreciates that as well. The kind of shift from the old perpetual way of licensing to the new SaaS model. It's a big challenge. I mean, optimization's really quite key. It's less about compliance now, more about making sure you're not spending money that you don't have to, on applications you're not using. There's also a big element of security concerns with SaaS. I mean, people, have got real concerns about where company data is residing, and the whole shadow IT side of things has been a big problem for people that, I'm aware that, really want to try and get on top of it as well. So, it's good to see that SaaS, I suppose, is getting embraced through that FinOps practice, because I think naturally over time, that's just going to get a lot better and better for people to manage. But ultimately, I suppose if you distill it down, it's all about making sure that the resources you're paying for are getting properly utilized and you're not wasting money.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And to your security element, it's important from a compliance point of view. You know, are these applications GDPR compliant? Do they respect HIPAA? There's more than I could even name for compliance frameworks that people are interested in, and company A might only be interested in one or two key points. Company B might be interested in not one and two, but another 10. So it is important to know, and it's not always as transparent. And the time it takes for someone to go through procurement and try and figure all these things out is quite lengthy. So it's good having tools that bring that together and sort of surface that. Yeah.
So if a customer does want to, look at scoping in SaaS as part of the FinOps practice and their approach, how would they go about it in the inform phase about gathering that information for SaaS usage? Because again, with cloud providers, it's simple. You can download consumption reports and spend reports directly from the partners. The key challenges there, I suppose, is there's lots of data. It's becoming easier to consume now. Focus is a thing. But how do they go about doing that for SaaS, given the fact that the market's so vast and there's so many vendors?
SaaS is a difficult one. It is. I would think that it is quite a lot of work to manage that, if I'm perfectly honest. So, speaking from my own experience with other companies, what I've found is there are a lot of department heads with credit cards that can sign up to services. So the central, say for example, the IT team was in charge of SaaS procurement. You might find that they can log on to each individual SaaS provider, and a lot of them will give activity reports. And that's a good way of starting to see who's using it and how often. Because, for example, training platforms, those sorts of things, if they're only using it for 1 or 2 minutes. Overall, they're using it, but is it good value for money? And it might be that you reach out to them and say, do you need this? And they're like, no, I had a look, but I don't actually use it. And you could give it to someone else. So you could avoid, we call that avoidance, because we're not getting rid of the license, but we are shifting it to someone who perhaps needs it more. So you can log on and do that individually. But yeah, I mean, the issue of shadow IT sort of is very ever present there. A lot of companies will have department heads who will spin up, where marketing, for example, could spin up Grammarly for the marketing people, and you've no idea that it's being used. And while it might not be a cost, because people again use personal licenses, so you've got direct policy followed procurement processes. You've got department heads. I wouldn't say going rogue, but paying on the credit card and it's not visible to the central procurement team. And you've got people using personal licenses. The personal licenses are a large concern because a lot of them, the personal tiers, don't allow for commercial use. So you could be in breach there and not even know it. They might not follow the security practices that you must follow. It might not meet the guidelines that you must follow. And you can be left in quite a vulnerable position where data can be flowing out of the company without your knowledge and with the best of intentions from everyone involved. So a lot more difficult for the if you were to hand roll your own solution, I think that's a lot more difficult an ask than cloud spend.
No, absolutely. So it's not just, how much of it is being used or not used. It's how it's being procured, how different teams are using it in silos. It's really difficult. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, some good points there. And I think when you look at SaaS, the challenges they're very different to managing the old traditional on-prem. Obviously, if people are paying for subscriptions that aren't being used, then that's one thing. But there's that many different options for different types of levels of subscriptions for different things. I mean, if you just look at M365 on its own, you've got so many different options that all cost, different amounts of money. And it's all about determining, are you actually on the right plan as well? So there's lots of intelligence that you need, to come up with those right kind of choices. But that's not all. The whole shadow IT thing, I think, is a massive problem for lots of organizations out there. And it is difficult in the informed phase of FinOps because if you don't know what's out there and what's being used, there's no way of managing it.
Exactly. Yeah. 100% agree. I mean, when you talk about the different levels of M365 and it applies to many SaaS vendors,
Yeah.
the plan level is important. And if you are just procuring licenses, assigning licenses, and letting people run with that, even if they are using the platform, they might not be using all of the platform. And it's important to understand that. And a lot of the service providers will give you sort of levels of activity throughout those SaaS platforms. So you can see what features they are and are not using and make an informed decision on that to perhaps downshift the license, or perhaps someone might be requesting more and you can see, well, actually, yeah, they are going to use that. Like based on what they've seen, every time they've requested something, they've used it. And conversely, the opposite. It might be that some people request stuff and you've got to monitor them and say, no, you're not using it. We'll downshift you. And if you need it again, just let us know. And the tools out there, and you've seen it on Zotero X. We try and make that frictionless. That's a message to a person. Do you still need this? Yes or no? No activity in X amount of time. And it's just a simple button click. that goes back to the system and automatically makes those changes required based on their feedback. So you're involving people at every stage, because I do not feel that people like being dictated to. Some people might say, I have had no work that involves that tool for 2 weeks. But personally, I know that every third week of the month, I'm going to use this tool heavily. So I need it. And you don't want to create those friction points, because the more friction you have, the less processes function smoothly. There'll be a breakdown of communication somewhere if you do that. So having tools in place that you can just say, on an automatic basis, you've not used it in X amount of days, weeks, months. Can we reclaim this license? Yes or no? And they can make that decision. And it might be that they get 2 or 3 of those. And at that point, you get a message yourself as the owner of the application, the FinOps practitioner responsible for SaaS management, and it says, listen, they say they need the license, but we've asked them 3 times because of no usage, and continually in that time, they've not used it, even though they've clicked, yes, I still need it. And then you can have a human conversation and just, sit down and go through that. Because shadow IT, like you say, it kind of goes out of control if you don't have anything in place to monitor it. And that's why I find it so difficult personally to manage shadow IT, because it's hard to surface. You can log on to your SaaS providers and see who's using, licenses and actually using the platform on a day-to-day basis. But I don't know what I don't know. And that's why you might have noticed recently you've got the Stereo X browser extension, a native app that's tracking that. It's tracking the usage of all those things, and every time it notices you go on a SaaS application, it'll log that, so we can then confirm that back and say, "Oh, Steve's using everything he's got," and it really makes our jobs a lot easier just to sort of offload that. Because going around standing over someone's shoulder is the only other way you're going to see if they're using something outside the normal procurement processes.
Takes the human kind of emotional element out and kind of provides real evidence to make informed decisions on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, in a year, we estimate that it's monthly. Can't recall the year, but monthly you're spending about 30 minutes managing each SaaS application as a sort of owner of the SaaS application. So that soon adds up, because most businesses have between 50 and 150 SaaS applications. An individual might be sat there listening thinking, I don't think so. But actually, when you start to add them up, the organization in the various different departments have lots of different applications that you're using, and managing each of those and each of those contracts and, each of those usage, it adds up quickly in terms of like man hours. Yeah, very much.
Wow. So really on the SaaS side of things, even the basics are hard to do. So, something like Stereo X, it can add a lot of value to customers, and even just in that early stage of the informed process, just to give them that visibility.
Yeah, I mean, our core is very much around surfacing that information to the user. So that is, the first thing you need to do. Without that, it's really difficult. Like I say, clouds, the data's there because they're charging you for it, and you can have a look through. If someone was using their own private cloud, that would be a bit weird. That would be something that you manage from an IT operations point of view. But SaaS is very difficult if Team A is allowed, say, for example, latest within ChatGPT. If someone's got their own personal license, well, they can log on, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But if you have a tool that surfaces that information, then you can act on it and say, "Hey, I notice you're going on ChatGPT a lot. Do you have a license? Is it your own license?" maybe we'll look at onboarding you to the team license, because again, you've got that audit capability, that that safety net that you don't have when people use their own personal licenses.
Yeah,
So it's important.
absolutely. Well, Mike, it's been fantastic having you on the show. We really appreciate taking the time to speak to us today. And hopefully all the listeners and viewers have found that really informative. I know I certainly have. FinOps is brand new. There's a lot of people want to understand more about it, start implementing it in their own organization. So hopefully that's been really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Absolutely.
Do this again sometime.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, listen, thanks so much for watching. We'll stay tuned for new upcoming episodes on other interesting topics. And if you have found the content in this episode useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got any feedback or any comments on anything else you'd like us to pick up on future episodes, then please get in touch, let us know, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.